Duke Ellington, one of the most important composers, songwriters in American music, not just jazz. While Ellington, his main style of music can be described as jazz, he drew from so many different angles and styles of music, European classical music. There were so many things in the blues that influenced jazz musicians in general, and especially Ellington. And there are so many things in jazz in general to discuss about what makes it different than other styles of music. And while all of these things have a contribution to what ultimately leads to jazz, I was trying to narrow it down to maybe just one element that we could talk about today for the song Sophisticated Lady, written by Duke Ellington. Now, it's true what they say, that a lot of jazz has a certain rhythmic feel called swing, but not all jazz does. Right? It's also true that harmonically, jazz is pretty sophisticated. It's usually not just triad-based type music. There's a lot of seventh chords in it, upper extensions, meaning like 9s, 11s, 13s, all kinds of diminished chords, augmented chords. The harmony is pretty broad, but not always. There are things about improvisation. Most people will say, oh, jazz, that means you improvise a lot. Not always. There are styles of jazz where the music is through composed, meaning there is no improvisation in the performance, right? But all those three things, the swing element, the harmonic sophistication, and the improvisation, absolutely are a huge part of what a lot of jazz is. Okay. One of the elements, and this piece, by the way, has all of those things. Okay, it swings, it's highly advanced harmonically. People usually solo and improvise, when they perform the song. But there's one other element that I haven't discussed yet, and that's the concept of melody. And while jazz can be pretty simple, melodically, in terms of the songs that are used to improvise on and so on, sometimes they're quite complex, especially when we get into the language of Charlie Parker, which is known as bebop, okay? And one of the elements of that makes it pretty sophisticated is the use of chromaticism. I think jazz, more than any other style of music, uses chromatic approach notes to the greatest extent, at least that I'm aware of. Okay, so and this song, Sophisticated Lady, is a great example of that. We have that both in the actual melody of the song and the harmonic movement of the chords. So we'll take a look at it today. And mind you, this is a very, very small piece of the big picture when it comes to this song in particular and jazz in general. But let's dive in and let's see what's going on here. All right, so first of all, we have a key signature, just like any other piece of music, and this one happens to be in the key of A flat major. And what we're doing is we're starting with something pretty simple. We're starting on the 2 chord, which is the B flat minor 7 chord. Okay, and the melody of it, though, we arrive there with a chromatic note, a half step from G flat to F, and we go like this. So right off the bat, the first thing we hear is this sort of chromatic movement. Okay, now from there, we're going to use elements of arpeggios in the melody, interspersed with more chromatic movement. So let's take a look at it. We're going to have an A flat major arpeggio up to the flat 7, which is G flat. Now, the chord movement is G flat dominant 7. So we have the root note in the melody, and we're going to move down 4 chromatic half steps from G flat 7, F7, E7, E flat 7, and then that E flat 7 is the 5 chord of the home key of A flat major 7. See that? So really, if you think about it, all it is a 2-5-1 movement, right? Essentially, because we had the B flat minor 7, eventually getting to an E flat 7 to the 1, 2-5-1 in A flat. But you see how we got there chromatically from G flat. Right, so that's pretty unique right there, and especially, you know, for the time period. This song was written in the 1930s, I believe the early 1930s, and that was a pretty adventurous sound. It still is. Okay, let's keep going. So from there, we're on the home key of A flat, right? And now what we're going to do, we have another arpeggio of an F minor, and now we're going up to E flat, which is the 5th of A flat, and now that A flat chord becomes a dominant 7 chord, A flat 7. And we're also going to move chromatically now as well. A flat 7, G7, G flat 7, F7. Now that F becomes the 5 of the 2 dominant 7 chord, which is B flat 7. Right, so often going from the 1 chord of a song to its major 2 chord, that's a pretty common move, right? We have that here. I mean, we are adding sevenths to all these chords, so that's a little bit of a harmonic step forward. But you see, the underlying harmonic movement isn't really all that, you know, mysterious. It's how we get there, though. So again, those chromatic notes, right? So, and now what we're going to do is have this little motif, and then we're on the B flat minor 7, that's the 2 chord, E flat 7, 2-5, and there's your 1 chord back to A flat. Okay, so within a pretty simple harmonic progression, there's the complexity of the chromaticism, both in the melodic aspect and in the harmonic aspect. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. All right, so that's the A section, and that's going to repeat. Let's go to the bridge, and there's something very interesting that happens here, which is actually related to chromatic notes as well. We have key modulation. So we were in the key of A flat, but now we're going to go to the key of G, a half step lower. Now that is very, very unusual, okay? And I remember years ago, there was a TV special. It was a documentary on Duke Ellington. It's probably on YouTube at this point. And they were interviewing him, I think sometime later, like in the 1950s or 60s. And I think they were asking him about how he was composing, how he composed Sophisticated Lady. And I think he said he came up with it in 10 minutes while he was waiting for his mother to finish cooking dinner. Which he probably did. I mean, that was the kind of genius Duke Ellington was. But he did something really interesting with that. They asked him about that modulation, to the bridge, that half-step thing. And he said something like, well, that's what I was feeling at the time. But I could have done this, I could have done this, I could have done this. And he went through like 3 or 4 different modulations to get to the bridge that were all totally different. And, whether he was, actually thinking about a chromatic movement there or not, maybe it was just the sound was in his ear at the time, but that's what we get. And I don't know of too many other tunes that do that kind of movement. So anyway, we're in the key of G now. And the harmonic progression is very easy. It's just 1, G major 7, 6, E minor 7, 2, A minor 7, 5, D7. Okay, but the way this all lays out, 1, 6, 2, 5, you have to take into account the melody here. And it kind of zigzags a little bit, right? It's sort of angular. It has this kind of thing. It's very singable, but it kind of skips along, And the thing of it is, when that's literally the way it's written. But how I'm used to hearing a lot of people play this and how I interpret it myself is I actually use chromatic notes to do this. So if I'm on a G major 7 and the melody note is a D, the 5th of the chord, right? It's going to go down to the 3rd of the chord. That's the move, right? I'll do this little chromatic thing. And it's just that it gives it that sort of jazzy kind of sound. I mean, I know that kind of sounds corny, but it's just a cooler sound. It's a hipper sound than just straightforward and all that kind of thing, which in and of itself is great. But I like this kind of thing. So, and then we have this. Same thing. And then that little approach tone from D sharp to E. Right, and then A minor 2, 2, D7 flat 9, 2, 5 back to G major. And now an unusual move here. We've got G7, right? So we're on the 1 chord of the bridge, but it's a dominant 7. C minor 7. And now we have this cool little thing. We're on the 5 chord now of the original key. We have an E flat 7. And then that leads us back to the next A section. We're back in the key of A flat now. So even that move from, going from the dominant 7 G, C minor. Now C minor is the 3 chord of A flat, and it kind of skips up a minor third to get to the E flat 7. And then we go through those chromatic moves again with the G flat 7, F7, E7, E flat 7, A flat. So that's just a little bit about, the use of chromatic notes in this piece. And again, we could take a look at some of the chord tones of the upper extensions and see how those are chromatic as well. For example, when I had the A minor 7 here in the bridge, going to D7 flat 9, I have this little E flat, D to get back to the main melody note on the G major chord. So that's just a very small part of what makes some jazz sound like that style of jazz. Like I said before, so many other things go into it. Probably the most important thing is the musicians themselves and how they play. You know, their feel, their time feel, their harmonic sensibility, their melodicism. All those things are really the most important thing. You can know all the tricks and all the theory and all the ins and outs, but if you're not playing with soul and with feel, it's no style of jazz will sound convincing if that's not there. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's breakdown. Jazz is a very large subject matter, so I hope this was a nice little introduction to a little bit of it for you. And if you liked today's video, please consider subscribing to my channel for more videos like this to come. And thank you for watching.